Well, hello, my friend. I'm so glad you decided to join me again in the study tonight. I so enjoyed our time last evening that I thought it would be remiss for me to not take the opportunity to read some more scary stories during this cold winter time. I see you have met one of my faithful hounds. This is Lewis, of course. He will be indignant, but, well, I am the master of the house after all. Some days. But as I was saying, I was so enjoying our time last night, and please forgive me for not availing of myself to you during the day, but I had matters to attend, some underground business to deal with, but I wanted to make sure that we took some time tonight to have some more Victorian era stories of spirits. But I was thinking, after our time yesterday, about a particular theme. And if you know me at all, you know how much I love love. And so I thought, it would be perfect. A little bit of romance. Because that is what I feel last night's readings did not reflect nearly enough. Was the love and romance and passions that people feel. And so I was also thinking about an old friend of mine, Mr. E.A. Poe. I imagine you have heard of him. In fact, you probably know many of his poems, or at least can name a few. But I thought to myself, what a perfect opportunity to get together and read some poetry. And then perhaps a story about a ghostly cat. I do know some of my friends are very fond of cats, and so perhaps you are too. Thank you again for being here with me tonight. I know today was colder than yesterday, so the mountain passes were, well, unpassable. But nevertheless, even though you are trapped by the weather, I'm glad you chose to join me anyway. And of course, I want you to enjoy the fire with me. And should you feel tired, feel free to fall asleep whenever you wish. One of the hounds, at the very least, will be keeping you warm. And don't worry, I'll be watching you sleep to make sure that nothing goes awry. But first, let us get on to the poetry. I was hearing that in the village green, the fellows and ladies of the town were singing about silver bells, and I thought to myself, with my thoughts turning, of course, to Poe, that the man himself did address the bells at one point, and so I thought that would be a fitting place to start. So, provided you are comfortable, and I hope you enjoy the drink I've prepared for you. Don't worry, it's perfectly safe. I'll be drinking it myself. But with no more introductions or asides or parenthetical observations, we will begin with a poem by Mr. Edgar Allen Poe. The Bells. Hear the sledges with the bells, silver bells. What a world of merriment their melody foretells. Candlelight's a little tricky. It's a little too bright. Let me try that again. How they twinkle, twinkle, twinkle in the icy air of night, while the stars that oversprinkle all the heavens seem to twinkle with the crystalline delight, keeping time, time, time in a sort of runic rhyme to the tintabulation that so musically wells from the bells, 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 from the jingling and the tinkling of the bells. Hear the mellow wedding bells, golden bells. What a world of happiness their harmony foretells. Through the balmy air of night, how they ring out their delight from the molten golden notes, and all in tune, what a liquid ditty floats to the turtle dove that listens while she gloats on the moon. Oh, from out of the sounding cells, what a gush of euphony voluminously wells. How it swells, how it dwells on the future, how it tells of the rapture that impels to the swinging and the ringing of the bells, 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 of the bells, 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 to the rhyming and the chiming of the bells. Hear the loud alarm bells, brazen bells. What a tale of terror now their turbulency tells. In the startled ear of night, how they scream out their affright. Too much horrified to speak, they can only shriek, shriek, out of tune, in a clamorous appealing to the mercy of the fire, in the mad expostulation, the death and frantic fire, leaping higher, 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 with a desperate desire and a resolute endeavor, now to sit or never by the side of the pale-faced moon. Oh, the bells, 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 what a tale their terror tells, of despair, how they clang and crash and roar, what a horror they outpour on the bosom of the palpitating air, yet the ear it fully knows by the twanging and the clanging. How the danger ebbs and flows, yet the ear distinctly tells in the jangling and the wrangling how the danger sinks and swells by the sinking or the swelling in the anger of the bells, of the bells, of the bells, 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 and the clamor and the clangor of the bells. I'm sorry, Lewis, I was in the middle of the verse. I couldn't. You can join me on the lap later if you wish. Hear the tolling of the bells, iron bells. What a world of solemn thought the monotony compels. In the silence of the night, how we shiver with affright at the melancholy menace of their tone. For every sound that floats from the rust within their throats is a groan, and the people, the people, they that dwell up in the steeple all alone, and who tolling, tolling, tolling in that muffled monotone, feel a glory in so rolling on the human heart a stone. They are neither man nor woman, they are neither beast nor human. They are ghouls, and their king it is who tolls, and he rolls, 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 a paean from the bells. And his merry bosom swells with the pain of the bells, and he dances and he yells, keeping time, 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 in a sort of runic rhyme, to the pain of the bells, keeping time, 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 in a sort of runic rhyme, to the throbbing of the bells, 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 to the sobbing of the bells, keeping time, 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 as he knells, 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 in a happy runic rhyme, to the rolling of the bells, 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 to the tolling of the bells, 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 to the moaning and the groaning of the bells. Well, I could see why the villagers were singing about the silver bells. It is a fanciful song and poem, perfectly married in this time of cold, almost desperate need for warmth. And that is why, of course, I want to share my fire with you, and my time, if you will avail me of it. But I'm grateful that you're here, and if you're already asleep, I hope you're sleeping well, and dreaming not of bells, but of something perhaps softer and finer, like love. So let us all move on to some of our stories of love, told still in poetic form, by my old friend Edgar. He was a tortured soul, you know. I tortured him myself. Like so many of us, he is a tempting target for insecurity. But one of his most famous poems, I'm sure you know the name, and I don't quote the one that you're thinking, although we will get to that later. I would feel remiss not to include it. No, here we are talking about Annabel Lee. So please enjoy this. Perhaps have a sip of your beverage. And we hear the words of Poe on this fine winter's night. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived that you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that, long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, and shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those that were older than we, and many far wiser than we. Neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can never dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I see the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the side of the sea. Powerful. Perhaps you have noticed from the portraiture on the walls of the halls here that I too have loved and lost. My own golden-haired maiden, but that is a tale too sad to tell on this fine winter's night. No, we shall continue with the words of Poe and marvel in their delight. Well, I have to say, he's catching, isn't he? We will move on from Annabel Lee to the name you may recognize. I give you Lenore. By Edgar Allen Poe. Ah, broken is the golden bowl, the spirit flown forever. Let the bell toll, a saintly soul float on the Stygian river. And guide a veer, hast thou no tear? Weep now or nevermore. See, on yon dire and rigid bier, how lies thy love, Lenore. Come, let the burial rite be read, the funeral song be sung, an anthem for the queenliest dead that ever died so young, a dirge for her that doubly dead in that she died so young. Wretches, ye loved her for her wealth and hated her for her pride, and when she fell in feeble health, ye blessed her that she died. How shall the ritual then be rend, the requiem how be sung? By you, by yours, the evil eye, by yours, the slanderous tongue, that did to death the innocents that died, and died so young. Go up to God so solemnly, the dead may feel no wrong. The sweet Lenore has gone before, with hope that flew beside, leaving thee wild for the dear child that should have been thy bride. For her, the fair and debonair, that now so lowly lies, the light upon her yellow hair, but not within her eyes. The life still there upon her hair, the death upon her eyes. Avaunt, tonight my heart is light, no dirge will upraise, but waft the angel on her flight with the pain of old days. Let no bell toll, lest her sweet soul, amid its hallowed mirth, should catch the note as it doth float up from the damned earth. To friends above, from fiends below, the indignant ghost is riven from hell unto a high estate far up within the heaven. From grief and groan to a golden throne beside the King of Heaven. Forgive me for my hesitation to continue. It's no matter. We will take but a moment, and then we shall quoth the raven. Much better. Cheers to you. May you love a love so well as that of the sweet Lenore. And speaking of Lenore, I was originally going to skip this, but I couldn't forgive myself. I'm sure you've heard it far too many times, read by far kinder people in far friendlier places, but here we are together tonight. So nevertheless, I give you The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still of bird or devil. Again, it doesn't rhyme. By that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, or endure. Tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, the angel's name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, the angel's name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. That's what the word is. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie. Be that word our sort of Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that thy soul hath spoken. Leave thy loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beacon out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting, still is sitting. On that placid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the meaning of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted. Nevermore. Well, that was an uplifting little tale, wasn't it? Oh, of lost love. But it is as they say. The night is dark and full of terrors, but love is a lamplight that shines in the dark, forever and ever and ever, because true love never dies. And with that thought, let us turn to the cat. A different tale. Well, perhaps it is stale. It's been around for 100 years. But a different tale. But another one by Poe, and this time about a cat. Actually, it's the wrong book. Here it is. The Black Cat by Edgar Allen Poe. And if you're asleep before I start, good night. Sweet dreams. May your morning be wonderful, and your day pleasant, and the night be quiet for you. If you hear creaks upon the stairs, don't worry. They're not for you. The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe. For the most wild yet homely narrative which I am about to pen, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet, mad I am not, and very surely do I not dream. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world, plainly, succinctly, and without comment, a series of mere household events. In their consequences, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me. Yet I will not attempt to expound them. To me they have presented little but horror. To many they will seem less terrible than Baroque's. Hereafter, perhaps, some intellect may be found which will reduce my phantasm to the commonplace. Some intellect more calm, more logical, and far less excitable than my own, which will perceive in the circumstances I detail with awe nothing more than an ordinary succession of very natural causes and effects. From my infancy, From my infancy, I was noted for the docility and humility of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I was especially fond of animals, as am I. I was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. With these I spent most of my time, and never was so happy as when feeding and caressing them. This peculiarity of character grew with my growth, and in my manhood I derived from it one of my principal sources of pleasure. To those who have cherished an affection for a faithful and sagacious dog, I need hardly be at the trouble of explaining the nature or the intensity of the gratification thus derived. There is something in the unselfish and self-sacrificing love of a brute which goes directly to the heart of him who has had frequent association to test the paltry friendship and gossamer fidelity of mere men. I can't say he's wrong, to be honest. Getting to the entrance here. Let's see how that does. I married early and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not ungenial with my own. Observing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring them the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. This latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black and sagacious to an astonishing degree. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with superstition, made frequent allusion to the ancient popular notion which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon this point, and I mention the matter at all for no better reason than that it happened just now to be remembered. Sorry, I kind of butchered that a little bit, but you know. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me whenever I went about the house. It was even with difficulty that I could prevent him from following me through the streets. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, through the instrumentality of the fiend intemperance, had, I blush to confess it, experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. So he's saying that he had to stop drinking and then became moody. Interesting. I suffered myself to use intemperate language to my wife. At length I even offered her personal violence. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected, but ill-used them. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, as I made no scruple of maltreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog when, by accident or through affection, they came in my way. But my disease grew upon me, for what disease is like alcohol? And at length even Pluto, who was now becoming cold, and consequently somewhat peevish, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home, much intoxicated, from one of my haunts about town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him when, in his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take its flight from my body, and a more than fiendish malevolence, gin-tinctured, thrilled every fiber of my frame. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. I blush, I burn, I shudder, while I pen the damnable atrocity. Wow. So he got drunk and put out the cat's eye with a penknife. I myself am a much more agreeable drinker. I hope you've noticed. I try not to drink too much. It would spoil everything. But I continue. When reason returned with the morning, when I had slept off the night's debauch, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse for the crime of which I had been guilty. But it was, at best, a feeble and equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I again plunged into excess, and soon drowned in wine all memory of the dead. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented, it is true, a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but, as might be expected, fled in extreme terror in my approach. I had so much of my old heart left, so first grieved, so to be at first aggrieved. Not exactly common phrasing. So to be at first aggrieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. But the feeling soon gave place to irritation. There came, as if to my final and irrevocable overthrow, the spirit of perversiveness. It's in capitals and italics. Perversiveness. Of this spirit, philosophy takes no account. Yet I am not more sure than my soul lives that I am that perverseness that is one of the primitive impulses of the human heart, one of the indivisible primary faculties or sentiments which give directions to the character of man, who has not 100 times found himself committing a vile or a stupid action for no other reason than because he knows he should not. I do have to confess that I have never stabbed my cat's eyes out with a penknife and then claimed that I was in the right, or at least am on par with other individuals. But anyway, these are not my words, merely the words of the character written by our friend Edgar. Have we not a perpetual inclination in the teeth of our best judgment to violence, that which is law, merely because we understand it to be such? Actually, he's got kind of a good point about modernity. The spirit of perverseness, I say, came as my final overthrow. It was this unfathomable longing of my soul to vex itself, to offer violence to its own nature, to do wrong for the wrong's sake only. That urged me to continue and finally to consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the offending brute. But he calls his cat a brute. It's terrible. After he puts his eye out. Actually, before he put his eye out, he called him a brute. Anyway. One morning, in cold blood, I slipped a mouse about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree. Wait, what? One morning, in cold blood, I slipped a mouse about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree. Hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse at my heart. Hung it because I knew that it had loved me, because I felt it had given me no reason of offense. Hung it in honor. I knew that in doing so, I was committing a sin, a deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy and the most merciful and most terrible God. On the night of the day on which this most cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtain of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the conflagration. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself therefore, to despair. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect between the disaster and the atrocity. But I am detailing a chain of facts in which not to leave even a possible link imperfect. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found in a compartment wall, not very thick, which stood about the middle of the house and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plastering had there, in great measure, resisted the action of the fire, a fact which I attributed to its having been recently spread. About this wall a dense crowd were collected, and many persons seemed to be examining a particular portion of it with minute and eager attention. The words strange, singular, and other similar expressions excited my curiosity. I approached and saw, as if engraven bas-relief upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. The impression was given with an accuracy truly marvelous. There was a rope about the animal's neck. When I first beheld this apparition, for I could scarcely regard it as less, my wonder and my terror were extreme. But at length reflection came to my aid. The cat, I remembered, had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. Upon the alarm of fire, this garden had been immediately filled by the crowd, by some one of whom the animal must have been cut from the tree and thrown through an open window into my chamber. This had probably been done with the view of arousing me from sleep. The failing of other walls had compressed the victim of my cruelty into the substance of the freshly spread plaster, the line of which, with the flames and the ammonia from the carcass, had then accomplished the portraiture as I saw it. That seems reasonable, doesn't it? Although I thus readily accounted to my reason, if not altogether to my conscience, for the startling fact just detailed, it did not the less fail to make a deep impression upon my fancy. For months I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat, and during this period there came back to my spirit a half sentiment that seemed, but was not, remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal. Went so far to regret his actions. Went so far to regret the loss of the animal, and to look about me among the vile haunts which I now habitually frequented, for another pet of the same species, and of somewhat similar appearance, with which to supply its place. One night as I sat, half stupefied, in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object, reposing upon the head of one of the immense hogsheads of gin, or of rum, which constituted the chief furniture of the apartment. I had been looking steadily at the top of the hogshead for some minutes. What now caused me surprise was the fact that I had not sooner perceived the object thereupon. I approached it and touched it with my hand. It was a black cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto, and closely resembling him in every respect but one. Pluto had not a white hair upon any portion of his body, but this cat had a large, though indefinite, splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search. I had once offered to purchase it off the landlord, but this person made no claim to it, knew nothing of it, had never met it before. I continued my caresses, and when I prepared to go home, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so, occasionally stooping and patting it as I proceeded. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once, and became immediately a great favorite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated, but I know not how or why it was. Its evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed me. By the slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature, a certain sense of shame, and the remembrance of my former deed of cruelty, preventing me from physically abusing it. I did not for some weeks strike or otherwise violently ill-use it, but gradually, very gradually, I came to look upon it with such unbearable loathing, to flee silently from its odious presence, as if from the breath of a pestilence. What added, no doubt, to my hatred of the beast was the discovery, the morning after I brought it home, that, like Pluto, it had been deprived of one of its eyes. This circumstance, however, only endeared it to my wife, who, as I've already said, possessed, in a high degree, that humanity of feeling which had once been my distinguishing trait, and the source of many my simplest and purest pleasures. With my aversion to this cat, however, partially for myself, seemed to increase. It followed my footsteps with a persistency which sorry about that. It followed my footsteps. Wow. Sorry about that. With my aversion to this cat, however, its partiality for myself seemed to increase. It followed my footsteps with a pertinacity which it would be difficult to make the reader comprehend, especially given my sentence structure. It followed my footsteps with a pertinacity which it would be difficult to make the reader comprehend. I did it. Wherever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. If I arose to walk, it would get between my foot, must nearly throw me down, or, fastening its long and sharp claws in my dress chamber in this manner, to my breast. At such times, although I longed to destroy it with a blow, I was yet withheld from so doing, purely by memory, my former crime, but chiefly, let me confess it at once, by absolute dread of the beast. This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, yet I should be at a loss how otherwise to define it. I am almost ashamed to own, yes, even in this felon's cell, I am almost ashamed to own that the terror and horror with which the animal inspired me have been hired by one, the merest chimeras it would be impossible to conceive. Chimeras. But one of the merest chimeras, I guess. Sorry, I grew up calling it chimeras. I've never read it out loud before. My wife had called my attention more than once to the character of the mark of white hair, of which I have spoken, which constituted the sole visible difference between the strange beast and the one I had destroyed. The reader will remember that this mark, though large, had been borne originally very indefinite, but by slow degrees nearly imperceptible, and which for a long time my reason struggled to reject as fanciful. It had, at length, assumed a rigorous distinctness of outline. It was now the representation of an object that I shuddered to name, and for this, above all, I loathed and dreaded, would have rid myself of the monster had I dared. It was now, I say, the image of a ghastly thing. Of the gallows, O mournful and terrible engine of horror, of crime, of agony, and of death. For now was I indeed wretched beyond the wretchedness of mere humanity, and a brute beast, whose fellow I had contemptuously destroyed, a brute beast, to work out for me, a man fashioned in the image of the high God, as much of unsufferable woe, alas, neither by day nor by night knew I the bleeding of rest any more. During the form of the creature left me no moment alone, and the latter I started hourly from dreams of irreversible fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face in its vast weight, so incarnate nightmare that I had no power to shake off, incumbent internally upon my heart. Beneath the pressure of torments such as these, the feeble remnant of the good within me succumbed. Evil thoughts became my sole intimates, darkest, most evil of thoughts. The moodiness of my usual temper increased a hatred of all things, of all mankind. whilst from the sudden, frequent, and ungovernable outbursts of fury to which I now blindly abandoned myself, my uncomplaining wife, alas, is the most usual, the most patient of sufferers. Now, I hope it doesn't end well for this man. One day she accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of the old building, which our poverty compelled us to so inhabit. The cat followed me down the steep stairs, and nearly throwing me headlong, exasperated me to madness. Uplifting an axe, and forgetting in my wrath the childish dread which had hitherto stayed my hand, I aimed a blow at the animal which, of course, would have proved instantly fatal had it descended as I wished. But this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded by the interference into a rage more than demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brain. She fell dead upon the spot without a groan. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith, with entire deliberation, to the task of concealing the body. I knew that I could not remove it from the house, either by day or by night, without the risk of being observed by the neighbors. Many projects entered my mind. At one period, I thought of cutting the corpse into minute fragments and destroying them by fire. As another, I resolved to dig a whole grave for it in the floor of the cellar. Again, I deliberated about casting it in the well in the yard, about packing it in a box, as if merchandise, unusual arrangements, and so getting a porter to take it from the house. Finally, I hit upon what I considered a far better expedience than either of these. I determined to wall it up in the cellar, and the monks of the Middle Ages, as the monks of the Middle Ages are recorded to have walled up their victims. For a purpose such as this, the cellar was well adapted. Its walls were loosely constructed, and had largely been plastered throughout with a rough plaster, which the dampness of the atmosphere had prevented from hardening. Moreover, in one of the walls was a projection caused by a false chimney, or fireplace, that had been filled up and made to resemble the rest of the cellar. I made no doubt that I could readily displace the bricks at this point, insert the corpse, wall the whole up as before, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. And in this calculation, I was not deceived. By means of a crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks, and, having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it in that position, while with little trouble I relaid the whole structure as it originally stood. Having procured mortar, sand, and hair, with every possible precaution, I prepared a plaster which could not be distinguished from the old, and with this I very carefully went over the new brickwork. When I had finished, I felt satisfied that all was right. The wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. Rubbish on the floor was picked up with minutest care. I looked around triumphantly, said to myself, "Here at least, then, my labor has not been in vain." So he has killed his wife, as he attempted to murder the cat she loved, that so haunted him because of the cat that he had loved and yet murdered for the crime of loving him. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness. The beast, cause of the wretchedness. For I had at length firmly resolved to put it to death. Had I been able to meet it at the moment, there would have been no doubt of its fate, but it appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger, and forbore to present itself in my present mood. It is impossible to describe or to imagine the deep, the blissful sense of relief which the absence of the detested creature occasioned in my bosom. It did not make its appearance during the night, and thus for one night, at least, since its introduction into the house, I soundly and tranquilly slept. I slept, even with the burden of murder upon my soul. The second and the third night passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again, I breathed as a freeman. The monster, in terror, had fled the premises forever. I should behold it no more. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Some few inquiries had been made. None of these had been readily answered. Even a search had been instituted, but of course, nothing was to be discovered. I looked upon my future felicity as secured. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of the police came, very unexpectedly, into the house, and proceeded again to make rigorous investigation of the premises. Secure, however, in the inscrutability of my place of concealment, I felt no embarrassment whatever. The officers bade me accompany them in their search. They left no nook or crannies unexplored. At length, for the third or fourth time, they descended into the cellar. I quivered not in a muscle. My heart beat calmly, as that of one who slumbers in innocence. I walked the cell from end to end. I folded my arms upon my bosom, and roamed easily to and fro. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. The glee at my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say but one word by way of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance my guiltlessness. "Gentlemen," I said at last, as the party ascended the steps, "I delight to have applied your suspicions. I wish you all health and a little more courtesy. By the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house." And the rabbit desired to say something easily, scarcely knew what I uttered at all. "I may say an excellently well-constructed house. These walls—" "Are you going, gentlemen?" "These walls are solidly put together. And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with a cane which I held in my hand on that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse, the wife of my bosom. but may God shield and deliver me from the fangs of the archfiend. No sooner had the reverberation of my blows sunk into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb, by a cry, first muffled and forlorn, the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, and continuous scream, utterly anomalous and inhuman, a howl, a wailing shriek, half of horror and half of triumph, such as might have arisen only out of hell, conjointly from the throats of the damned in their agony, and of the demons that exult in that damnation. For my own thoughts it is folly to speak. Swooning, I staggered to the opposite wall. For one instant, the party on the stairs waited motionless, their extremity, terror and awe. In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. It fell bodily. The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head, with red, extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder, and whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman. I had walled up the monster inside the tomb. And there it is, The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe. I hope you've enjoyed our time together. I, of course, have. How could I not? But it is time for rest, and I believe the hounds are hungry. They hunt at night, you know. But if you are asleep, I wish you the sweetest of dreams. May you awaken tomorrow with a high heart and find a love that endures from beyond the grave. I bid you good night. Remember that I love you. Finger taps. Oh, I believe here comes one of the hounds to say good night as well. Hello, Miss Talizora, Vostera Naaman. She is queen of the house. She is letting me know it is time for bed. Again, I bid you good night, and I hope you rest well. May you dream sweet dreams, not dreams of hell. I can't help it, Poe makes me laugh. Good night. Come, hellhounds. It is time for sleep. Be still.